Welcome back to the Alts Podcast. I'm your host, Horacio Ruiz. We bring you industry leaders and creators to give their insights on the rapidly changing and exciting world of alternative assets. Opinions expressed on this podcast by the host and podcast guests are for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. Podcast hosts and guests may maintain positions in the offerings discussed in this podcast. The intro song, Fishing for Pets, is written and composed by Alan Goldshire from his latest release, Live at the Lakeview Lounge. Thank you for joining the Alts Podcast. Hope you're having a good one. Today's guest is Walter Ramirez, the Urban and Contemporary Art Consignment Director at Heritage Auctions. Today, Walter and I will talk about urban art, how it's defined, and how it continues to grow in popularity and demand among art collectors. Walter discusses his path toward working at Heritage, his interest in urban art, and his thoughts and observations as graffiti and NFTs move mainstream and embody the movement of a new art class. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Walter. So I just kind of wanted to start. You were telling me that you had just come back from picking up some art. Was that for Heritage or for your own personal collection?
So it's actually I was picking up a consignment downtown Manhattan for our next urban art auction that we're working on for our June auction. A couple pretty cool pieces, 2 canvases and 1 metal sign graffiti piece. So it's pretty cool.
I think that the urban art scene is growing. I'm no expert, and kind of that's why we love having experts on the podcast to talk about what they do and what the trends are. You are the Urban Art and Contemporary Art Consignment Director at Heritage. What is that? What is urban art? How can we categorize that? And what are the different forms that it can take?
So urban art, has become this sort of subcategory to contemporary art. Usually encapsulates urban culture, youth culture, more really contemporary art that's in with the trends. It's trendy, it's almost poppy, like pop art related. So there's different subgenres to urban art in itself. There's graffiti art, the more classical graffiti art that we see in the streets. Artists who have been doing it since the 70s and 80s, that will be classified under graffiti art, whereas street art is more like 90s, thousands graffiti art, but that has evolved into something else. Perfect example of this would be like Shepard Fairey here in the United States, or Vils out in Europe. Those would be like street artists who fall under the category of urban art. And for graffiti art, it will be artists like Coke 2, Cornbread, Taki 187. They are more graffiti artists who started out in the 80s and that early scene, and they have a way different style than the Shepard Fairies or the Vils of these days. And then of course under the urban art umbrella, we also have what we call ultra contemporary art, which is more of like the working artists such as Daniel Arsham, Cos, Javier Calleja, those type of artists who are doing this work that the collectors who collect street art, graffiti art are collecting as well. So urban art can be, sort of a niche term, but at the moment it works for us in terms of how we brand and classify this art and how we sell it.
Yeah, when I think of urban art, right? Because maybe what the words make me think of, I think of graffiti and I think of that kind of art. And I was never really into that. Is that something that's kind of growing in terms of respectability or in terms of collectability?
It is, especially more of that old school graffiti art. It is becoming popular nowadays. Just, in our last sale, we had a Futura. He started off as a graffiti artist and he evolved into a more, contemporary artist. Now he's really highly collected. We sold one work for $137,000. So it tells you the market is growing for this type of art. People want more graffiti art, people want more urban art, and it's becoming more respected compared to what it was. At one point it was seen as vandalism, but over the last 20 years that has been starting to shift into an actual art form.
I saw that it was gaining acceptance or gaining popularity because there were some baseball cards. Like Topps put out this Project 70, and Futura was one of the artists actually. And there were other, because it's funny that you mentioned him, there were other artists, and graffiti really played a large theme in the collection. And I was surprised that it did. I mean, I got exposed to like certain like art, like I'm looking here, Claw Money. She's a New York based artist. Basically, just the graffiti was really prominent in the collection, and kind of like opened my eyes a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that project the Tops did was a good way for them to like show more exposure for some of these artists. They're showing that they are actually artists who are becoming highly collectible. They're showing their appreciation for it, and that's one of the things that you know shows how the world is changing towards urban art. Museums nowadays, they try to have major art exhibitions. Museum of the City of New York actually had an extremely well curated auction called City as a Canvas, and that was a major exhibition that just showed how graffiti is not just vandalism, and an art form that's going to be appreciated more and more as year comes.
Yeah, absolutely. I got a set of questions here. I'm just kind of curious if we could take a step back and talk about you for a second. It seems like you've got a pretty cool job. You're traveling around the city. You're getting exposure to all these artists and their creations, what they create. How did you get involved with heritage auctions, and how did you become sort of like an expert in urban art?
Taking it back to how I started at Heritage Auctions, started off as an intern. Worked my way through operations, and eventually got the opportunity to become a specialist. It took a process of 6 years. I started back in 2014 and only became a specialist in 2020. So, I've been doing this for a couple years now, and I've been helping it bring in some large collections and all that. But my interest for urban art started, as a young kid, seeing graffiti, around the city, collecting sneakers, that type of stuff. Also being exposed to a lot of graffiti documentaries early on. One of them was Exit Through the Gift Shop that Banksy did, which was based on Mr. Brainwash. So stuff like that exposed me early on, and I liked it a lot. That I started researching it and becoming more and more involved with the scene, and I started collecting myself. I started buying prints from artists like Shepard Fairey, Cleon Peterson, more of like the affordable ones at the time for me, and I've been just getting bigger and bigger into the scene.
Yeah, for sure. I noticed that it's an auction up right now, and Shepard Fairey is kind of prominent right now. I didn't even know who the name was, until I saw it was like Obey the Giant, Obey. And I remember seeing that when I was a kid, like in high school, middle school. And I was like, what is this Obey? And and it had Andre the Giant's, kind of face. And it was just it played such a role in my upbringing without even knowing it. Like kids were wearing this all around me. I think that's just interesting how it's like the influence is around you, and sometimes you're kind of like not even aware of it.
It's true. I mean, when you think about it, Shepard Fairey, like his big moment was doing the Hope poster for Obama during the 2008 campaign. Since then, his like market blew up. He became, considered like this big, like important artist in time. But he had been around for close to 20 years prior to that campaign poster, and he was known again for the Obey Giant posters that we saw as kids, the clothing and everything. So he was always there, but his popularity didn't, take off until that one moment in time.
What have you noticed since you started? You say you kind of became a specialist in 2020. Has there even been a change since, let's say, maybe when you were an intern there, you noticed some things maybe in 2019, 2018, up until now? Has urban art even evolved in that one little small time period?
Yeah. I mean, prior to 2018, we had no urban art department at Heritage Auctions. It was just still considered part of the modern contemporary umbrella, and the department hadn't like split from that category. It hadn't become a category on its own. I credit Leon Benramon, who used to work with Heritage. He was the one who like pushed forward this. We got to have an urban art auction, and since he had the first urban art auction, we just started adding more and more sales ever since, and it's become one of the fastest growing departments in Heritage Auctions. It's just we started with one sale, and now we have about 20 sales a year.
Wow. So, I mean, what caused that change? Is it that kids that grew up, and you, like you said, you grew up and you saw graffiti around the city, and for sure some of these guys and girls are so talented. Is it now that, our generation is coming of age and kind of having nostalgia for that and almost getting more appreciation for it, and now we can go back and buy some of this stuff that the market is kind of perking up? What do you credit the rise of graffiti as an art to, or urban art?
It definitely pop culture, I feel like, has a big influence on it. When you look at like music videos of like the era, or you look at album covers, they always like use like a graffiti artist. Justin Bieber had, on one of his covers, he used the artwork of Retina, and Retina is a big graffiti artist out in LA. We have the world record for his work at auction, so it's definitely been helped by a lot of pop culture. A lot of us who like saw it as young kids also now really want these pieces now that we are working, that we're we just want to own art just like our parents did, or other people in the past have done. And the best way to go about it is to buy things we like. And we like things with cartoon characters from the 90s. Like I would go out and buy a painting that has SpongeBob on it, even though most people will probably say, oh, why are you buying that? But it's like, that's what I like. I grew up watching SpongeBob. That's what I want to have in my house. So definitely pop culture has helped a lot of that. And like urban art has that crossover with pop culture itself. A lot of graffiti artists, a lot of street artists, they use all these characters in their paintings, their prints, their vinyl figures, and in the end, it's like, oh, I want that. I want that in my office. I want that in my house. I want that in by my TV.
For sure. We always talk about the emergence of new markets, but I'm wondering if to some extent you also get a pushback, to where maybe it's the older generation, or even not, just somebody that doesn't believe in urban art as a class. Do you still find that sometimes, being a heritage, being, where you guys are auctioning off pieces from different, eras, and how does urban art stack up against that? Do you ever get being like, that's not art?
We do. I mean, when you think about it, most contemporary art does get that from different departments. Some people will look at a Jackson Pollock and will say that's not art. At Heritage Auctions we have a big comic art department, and we sell some of these pieces for millions of dollars, and some people are like, that's not art, but it is art. In the end, it's like an artist sat down and put work into it. So there's always pushback on different generations, different experts, you could say, who are like, oh, I don't see this as art. But as long as somebody's seeing it as art, it is art.
For sure. I kind of want to cross that over into, I guess, maybe something that's the most controversial form of art right now, which is NFTs, right? Where it's like, you're buying JPEGs, and but other people who are in the space say like, we're going to be studying a lot of it, not every single project, right? But a lot of these images, we're going to be studying them, and they're going to go down in art history books. Is that kind of it? Is that the appeal of NFTs? Is it that we're really looking at urban art in a new format, a digital format?
I think so. When you look back, everything can be, you could even say is like the evolution of art in itself. Impressionism was hated on when it was happening. Dadaism, Cubism, all these isms, in the early 20th century were always looked down upon as, lesser art. Nowadays, some people look at urban art as lesser art. And at the moment, the one that's getting a lot of hate from a lot of, you know, so-called art collectors and everything is our NFTs, because it's just something that they don't see as art, even though it is, it is art. It's digital art, but it is art. It's like it's all based on, of course, the blockchain. So it's easier to authenticate. It's easier to prove the provenance and all, which is a big thing in art. So NFTs, we consider them part of our urban art department. We do sell some NFTs and some art sales, but NFT is definitely an evolving contemporary art form. Like it is the next step to urban art in a sense. And a lot of urban art artists themselves are working in the space. They are, always producing new NFTs. They are working on big projects. So it is definitely like the next medium for them to do.
What are your thoughts on that? Like as a consignment director, right? Do you find that when it comes to urban art, people are still looking to get the physical items, or are you looking like like NFTs are slowly creeping up to where it might become its own department at Heritage? I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas there. Like, how have NFTs changed the game, I guess?
They have certainly changed the game in in the sense that like it cuts a lot of the operations of that middle section of like shipping something, photographing it, physically holding an item. It has definitely changed that. Like now we could just look at the description online. It's almost like a copy and paste in the end. That has definitely changed the operation sides of it. Some people do, they are still, really stuck on the physical aspect of it. Some people like when an NFT has like a physical like token. We have sold a couple Beeples before, and they had like the physical token, which is like this little screen that you can see the image moving, and it has all the information there. People like that, and I think that is a strong selling point right now for NFTs. But some people are seeing that, oh, that's not really necessary, and they are getting more and more into it. There are a lot of like projects that are not worth as much as like as they should be, but people really like, especially people who have been like working on this platform for a long time. They're the ones people are looking at. They're looking at the big projects like the CryptoPunks, the Bored Apes, the Mutant Apes, all that stuff. Those are the ones that people are like, we don't need the physical attribute that comes with it. We just need to own one, and it becomes also a social status at one point.
Yeah, for sure. It's a big time flex when you are able to show one of those as your PFP, right? As like your profile picture.
Mm-hmm.
I'm taking it back. To me, the guy that embodies urban art is Banksy. And part of that is because also like he is so like kind of mysterious, right? Like I don't know. I don't think that there's ever been a picture taken of Banksy. I don't know if that's accurate or not. I guess the one thing that I'm kind of thinking of is he goes around, right? And he kind of does his art on walls, on buildings, and they get discovered the next day. And I think that's like so magical. It's almost like fairy tale like. And then I've seen where, the owners of those buildings have literally not torn down the wall, but they cut that section of the wall out, and then it gets transferred to whatever, to a museum or to an auction house. I'm wondering, like, what's the thought behind that? Like, does a Banksy belong like that? Like, does that belong out in the wild? Or at this point, does it need to be taken care of?
That has always been like a controversial thing in the urban art world, when people take a piece from the wild, the public space, and they try to sell it. We at Heritage, we whenever we do get like an inquiry about that, we usually pass on it. We turn it down because those pieces were not meant to be, you know, in a private space. They were not meant to be sold. They were supposed to be out there for the world to see, and that's the mentality behind it. Like, we don't want to be known for, oh, people are just taking those off the walls out of New York, like an Invader or a Banksy, and they are selling them. It doesn't look good. So we definitely try to avoid those, and we are, in the belief that these works need to be in the streets. The artists, put in that work for it to be viewed by everybody. It could be accessible by everybody, so it should be out there. If it's taken to a museum, it's a little different, but again, a lot of like the people who like take these from the buildings usually are trying to sell them just because they got lucky with that, that they were randomly chosen. And a lot of these artists also, they make one also for private sale. So it's not like, that's like that one's supposed to be meant for the space, and then there's supposed to be one for the private market. Invader is one of them. Like, he does his invasions, but he also has like the pieces that are accessible to collectors.
That's so interesting to me as an auction house. And I hope you don't get offended, Walter. Like, I would imagine that you guys would be like, yes, we're going to make millions of dollars off this Banksy. Not saying that you guys are greedy or anything, but that would draw a lot of attention, that would maybe also lift up some other auctions that are in the same, in the same kind of sales. I find that really interesting that you guys take that position.
I think most large auction houses do. These pieces, when somebody brings it to us, they're defacing sometimes public property in order to like take it down. Even though sometimes they do take it from their own building, it's still, it's not a good look in the sense of like selling something just taken off the street. That's just, has been the mentality for, the big auction houses like us, Sotheby's, Christie's. I never seen them sell any of these, Phillips. So I have seen it in the market before, and it usually tends to be, some of our smaller competitors. They definitely have done it in the past, but it's definitely, they get called out on it. and especially the urban art boards. People are discussing it. They're like, "Oh, that is not cool. That's sort of disgusting." Those are like some of the words that they have used in the past, and we try not to be on that boat. As you know, even though we would, why not? We it's like we could easily make $1 million off one of them. We don't want to be known as like, oh, they sold one that was taken off the wall 10 years ago and we haven't been able to see it because the owner got greedy or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. Could you talk a little bit, about the ownership? Like, so if an artist is out and uses a public space to do graffiti, do they retain the rights to that? Say somebody does want to cut out that section of the wall, or if they even want to, like, I saw somehow there's methods now where you can actually like take a lot of that paint and kind of put it onto another surface that you can copy the graffiti. But do the artists retain like the rights to that?
I don't think so. It's a complicated world when it comes to that. The image is still the artist's image, but since they did it on a space that's public, it belongs to the public, or on a private property, it belongs to that who owns it. So it's definitely the artists. They don't argue when it's taken down. They don't argue when people try to sell it because they know they did it as an what some people call vandalism or invasion of others' property. So they sort of did them a favor by providing something that sort of an asset to them. But in the end, it is vandalism. Like Banksy vandalized the house, and that house they can now make money off of it as sort of like now that I have to take down this wall because he ruined it. I I might as well get paid for it. That's how they see it sometimes also.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's the world's most valuable vandalized wall. Are we still in a discovery phase with urban art? And what I mean by that is like, have there been situations where there have been certain artists that are kind of like the for lack of a better term, the flavor of the day, right? The flavor of the week. Like they're in style, and then I don't know, a couple of years later, a different kind of style catches people's attention, and then these other artists kind of fall by the wayside. Is that the case, or is it the case to where once an artist reaches a certain status, they kind of stay there?
I think is this evolving and revolving art world or category where artists are always rediscovering themselves. They always adapt to change. So if style has become a little bit more popular, some artists do adapt to it. They definitely try to follow the trends. There are some who like stay with it, but like a lot of them, are always looking to evolve. That's for sure. This discovery phase of urban art is always there. Every year we find a new artist, a new style like we didn't think was there, and all of a sudden that gets popular and people want that, and then all of a sudden everybody else starts doing it. So, and you can see that with the NFT. As soon as NFTs blew up, everybody started doing NFTs. In a sense, a lot of these artists, you can even see Damien Hirst is a big name who started doing these NFTs, and he has been just crushing it with it, as the kids say nowadays. And a lot of these artists, Matt Gondek, Shepard Fairey, they all have dabbled into it and made a killing as well because it's that discovery phase for them and for the collectors. They're like, oh, there's the new work they're doing. I want it. Or there's the thing that people are buying now. I want to do that. That's how we see it.
I guess kind of like related to that, and one of my last questions is like, what is your day to day like in terms of like discovering artists, noticing trends? Are you going to like galleries in the city? Are you getting phone calls? Are you going to shows at night, kind of where there's different artists kind of displaying their art? Because there are so many talented artists out there, right? And there's so many different ways of expressing that art. How do you go about like really identifying who's kind of catching on and who maybe might be somebody that you would have in your auctions?
So there's always, a challenge to see who's like the next big artist. But we try to be involved with the art community. We at least, at the level as much as we can. We could go and see the shows here in New York easily or in the tri-state area. Going anywhere else, like, going to Japan to see who's hot over there at the moment is a little harder, but we do have other tools that we use, such as social media, reading articles, reading gallery reviews, art show reviews, seeing, who is being sold at international auction houses, and if it's something we could sell. and we just look at a lot of these different things just to see what is next, what is the next big thing, who is hot at the moment, who is cooling down. Also, that's one thing we always look at. Oh, is this artist soft at the moment? Haven't seen or heard anything about them, or the market has gone down. It's like we want to be a little cautious also about that because we don't want to be doing a terrible thing for some of our consigners, just taking something in just to take it in, and then all of a sudden it just sells for one bid and they get angry at us. It was like we let them know the market is soft at the moment. This is what you can expect. We want to be as transparent as we can in that sense. But you know, looking for new artists is always a challenge, but it's always a fun challenge. It's like, oh, we get to go see a show downtown at X, and meet some cool people. So then we hear who they're buying. Also, it's like we also talk to clients themselves, like, oh, who are you buying now? And then we get an idea of like who are people looking at.
I imagine that in some ways, and, not as a commentary, but it's almost you really have to have as an artist either a really meaningful style or a style that really hits people, and in some ways maybe you need to also be somewhat connected, right? I mean, because all it takes is that one buyer that kind of will pay a certain amount of money for your work to kind of get your name out there. Am I in the right ballpark there, or no?
It's a mixture of everything. If you have the right talent, you could easily, take off and do it big. But it does take at least to have a good backer, a good support, system. If you have a good gallery or a good, person who's sponsoring you, they're gonna like, make sure your artwork gets bought, and they will do a good job of it, at it. And then next thing you know, you're making thousands and hundreds of thousands selling artwork. So it is true, if you have that one buyer who's like almost funds your initial run, then I think you could definitely make it big. A lot of artists start that way. They have a couple people who like buy like 10, 15 artworks when they're like just starting off, and that funds their whole project of like getting a studio running, getting a couple of assistants, expanding to galleries, expanding to other states, other cities, and trying to get into also the popular world out there, like pop TV, all that stuff. If you get onto a show, if one of your artworks is collected by a celebrity, boom, everybody's looking for that. They're like, oh, I see an artwork by so and so, I want that now. And then they do the research, and next thing you know, your prices go up, your demand goes up, and yeah, it just takes that one backer or one client for you to like really blow up.
That's so interesting, so cool. Walter, I got two more quick questions. Really appreciate your time. It's kind of a big picture question, So what basically, I mean, you've described a lot of the aspects of your job. What would you say is like the coolest part of your job? What's your favorite part of the job, either on a day-to-day basis or just like when you're able to do something special every so often?
I think just being in the office that I'm at is, one of the best things of this job, because even though I'm in the urban art department, I get to see art I like a lot. I also get to see other departments such as our sports collectibles. They come through our office, so I get to see signed baseballs by some of my favorite players from the 90s or the 2000s. I get to see comic art and comic books. I get to see American art. I get to see handbags, which I'm not a big collector, but I'm a fan of like seeing them, like Hermes bags. You get to see the craftsmanship of this. So I think that's one of the best parts of the job, just being able to see everything that people are collecting, and sometimes trying seeing these interesting, weird, niche things. At one point, we had Lincoln's hair come through our office, and seeing something like that, you're like, that is super cool, but a little bit weird that people are buying hair, but it is a historical thing, so I get it. But yeah, I think that's definitely the best part of the job.
Man, hair's not so bad. I've seen some stuff at auctions where I'm like, that is cringy, man. And I'm not going to name it because I just don't want to, but like, it dealt like with tragic, events. And I'm just like, who wants a piece of that? And sure enough, somebody will buy that.
It's true. If you collect something and you think it's unique, the chances are somebody else is collecting it out there. As morbid and it can be, there's somebody else who's like doing it out there. So there's always a market for anything. And some things are frowned upon, of course, and there are things I myself frown upon. It sells. It's somebody's out there who wants it and somebody who's willing to sell it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't mean to come off as preachy or anything. I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I guess, you can't help but put yourself in that position. Like, I don't know if I'd be comfortable owning this, but like you said, hey, there are collectors of every kind out there. And so who am I to say, hey, there shouldn't be a market for that or whatever? And I guess the last question then would be heritage auctions. Like you said, the urban art department was, a couple years old, about 4 years old. Where do you see it taking off? Where do you see the department being in 4 or 5 years and maybe your role in it?
I can see it like definitely growing even more than it has in the last 4 years. I can see it still be successful. It's something that people always want to buy. People always want to have your vinyl toys. People want to collect sneakers. So we're definitely going to be expanding more. I feel that we are definitely going to add more to the category, like sell more NFTs in the future, definitely sell more sneakers in the future. Like one thing I would really like to do is like, maybe in the future do like a hip hop auction. I know some other auction houses already done it, but I would like to do it. That would be a cool thing to do, trying to, bring something from my, childhood to the world. Like, oh, these are the artists who sometimes are a bit obscure to some other people, but that type of material will be something that I would personally like to expand upon, heritage. But it's going to be a work in progress. But for sure, I see the department, becoming more successful, just bringing in more high quality consignments. At the moment, we are running about 20 auctions. So maybe in like 3 or 4 years, we might be running 40 auctions if, our success continues at the rate that it's going.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I like hearing like, putting in your own kind of style into the auctions, right? Like you being able to curate an auction would be really cool, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that we are, starting to do. We do a lot of curated auctions. They're smaller, but they're definitely been popular in the past. Like we did like a Banksy auction, like a Banksy only auction. We did the Sheppey Ferry auction that you saw online. We also have had a couple like Bear Brick auctions and stuff like that. So it's something that we have the capabilities of doing. We just gotta bring it to a wider world.
For sure. Walter, how can people connect with you or the urban art department at Heritage? Do you guys have like a social media account that people can contact you?
We do. Our social media account is Heritage Urban Art or Instagram. People could easily email me at walterr@ha.com. That's always a good way to reach out to me. If they're in New York, you can stop at the office. We're on Park Avenue, 445 Park Avenue. So that's a good way to like stop by and see if you have anything on display. So there's many ways you could access us. Our website is ha.com, pretty simple, ha.com. I'm a fan of the short website, 2 letters, perfect,
There's power in that for sure.
Exactly. At one point we were selling domain names. We still have that department, but we still do them. But the shorter the domain, the more popular it was. So, it's always been, a trend I've seen in the past. And I'm like, you know what? I appreciate that. Short domains are a thing. I'm all for it.
It's funny. My previous podcast was with Victor Ma, and he's actually he sold our company that domain name alts.co, and he was talking about exactly that, like how the short domain names are almost like they're OGs. They're like, because those are the first to go whenever they're available, right? Those short one word domain names are what people are going to claim first. So if you're able to do that, it's almost like an online flex. It's like, hey, I got this, and you don't. In the same way that an NFT is, and that people are like, look at me, I got a Bored Ape, So I found that so interesting. I found that the crossover between NFTs and domain names, it's almost like they're their own ways of flexing your status online. Walter, thank you for taking the time to talk. It was a pleasure. Walter Ramirez, he's the Urban Art and Contemporary Art Consignment Director at Heritage Auctions. Walter, thanks for coming on, and hopefully we can talk at some other point in time.
Thank you, Horacio. It was great, talking with you, a fellow New Yorker, actually, which is pretty cool. You're right over the river. I have a lot of family in Staten Island, so it's pretty cool to, see that a fellow Staten Islander.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I appreciate it, man. Yeah. Shout out to Staten Island, man. Pete Davidson, Colin Jost, putting us on the map too, man.
Exactly. And Wu-Tang Clan. Can't forget them.
Oh, of course. All right, man. Take care, man.
Thank you.
The enduring image I have is of Walter growing up in New York City, walking by walls with graffiti, the very art that has played a part in defining his career. It was also interesting to hear the thought process behind not taking on certain artworks, like Banksy's, that were removed from public spaces. It was encouraging to hear Walter talk so positively about NFTs as works of art and the disruption they are causing in the art world because of the technology and the ease with which they can be curated. No more getting on the subway with somebody else's expensive piece of artwork. Urban art is, I think, meant for the enjoyment of the masses and not just a select few. Thanks again for spending part of your day with alts. If you enjoyed listening to the podcast, let others know about this episode or others, or leave a review or a comment, hopefully a positive one. Until the next episode, take care.